Hello. Today's video is called Escaping Everyday Reality. So, why would we want to escape everyday reality, and what are the tools for doing so? So first of all, we consider the mundane everyday. It's something that's quite routine and dull and ordinary, and if we become too engrossed in the everyday, in the sense of the dull repetition like a hamster wheel, then it can lead to many negative psychological states such as depression or perhaps stress if the same everyday problems are occurring, and even to anxiety perhaps. And certainly if we're on the treadmill of life and it just seems to be relentless in the monotony of the everyday routine, then it's something that needs some form of alleviation. And this is where there are various tools we can use. So for me personally, I've never liked the everyday. We sort of have an illusion of ordinary life, and for me the real life is the inner life. And I was very pleased to find that I shared this perspective with one of the giants of Portuguese literature, Fernando Pessoa. And in his book of Disquiet, it's an amazing book, and he describes in detail his own inner feelings and how he lives in the imagination, and even creates various personae for himself, which is a bit excessive, but the point is we should live in the inner world, at least at times. We have to venture outside, we can't be hermits entirely, but to at least have a rich inner world is very important. And for this there's both spirituality and the creative imagination. You can almost see the creative imagination as a secularization of the inner spiritual space. So when we talk about the romantics, like romantic poetry for example, and the almost nature worship in a way that characterizes a lot of romantic thought, it is a secularization of that inner spiritual space. So I hold out the two options there: spirituality and creative imagination, but the two tools for accessing the inner world. And this inner world is vital. In fact, yes, Fernando Pessoa talks a lot about dreaming, about dreams. I don't just mean actual REM sleep and that sort of thing. I'm talking about the state of dreaming, of having a very creative and open perspective on life, and sort of almost going into a fictive world, but not quite, because you don't want to be trapped in illusion. But really, if we take a Neoplatonist perspective, it's almost as though art doesn't imitate nature, as Aristotle says, but art imitates the intellectual ideas, intellectual metaphysically, that is sort of super rational, above rational ideas, and symbology, symbolism, all that sort of thing. So when we consider that art can imitate those ideas or even forms in the Platonic sense, then art and the imagination that goes with it is in fact very important and more real than everyday life, which is just an illusion ultimately, because it doesn't access the core of being. The core of being is lived out on the inner plane, and we just live a humdrum everyday existence, which most people do. Let's face it. You're not going to access your core inner being that way. You need a, you need additional tools, and now reading is a great tool, of course, because through the power of reading, whether it's a work of fiction or a work of non-fiction, we can access all these inner faculties of the creative imagination. And it's quite obvious in fiction how that works. We enter a fictive world, but it's a fictive world, it isn't a false world, because it supersedes everyday mundane life. It's like entering the creative imagination in a very forthright way. And yes, reading a novel or a poem accesses a higher truth, and that higher truth places it above the outer world. So it's not as if it's a false reality. It's a fictive world, but that fictive world transcends the everyday. So it's very important. Then obviously with non-fiction, philosophy, for example, that's the power of ideas, and the power of ideas can really inspire, creatively inspire. I read a lot more non-fiction nowadays than fiction, and especially philosophy, and I find that really inspires me on a creative level, and in a way we create our own reality our out of our reading of non-fiction, because non-fiction is of course about the world in a factual sense. There's always some factual element in non-fiction, and by definition. And yes, I think both fiction and non-fiction are important tools, but also, of course, the power of music, as I've said many times before. I don't want to get into that now. I'm just saying that Schopenhauer thought that music was one of the most important uh, tools for accessing the core of reality, the core of being, because he said the world is embodied music, which is a very powerful quote, and so there's that as well. But yes, escaping everyday reality, it's important to take the time to focus on our inner being, the world of the imagination, the creative insight that we can lend to life, and it's important to feel inspired, because if we don't feel inspired, we're going to become victim to depression and perhaps stress and anxiety, and we really want to avoid those things. But even just a mild, even a mild dullness of being due to the monotony of everyday life, we've got to escape that cycle. And I'm not saying you have to do something drastic in your outer life, and I'm saying change the inner life, and then you can find much more contentment through a revolution of the inner life. And as I say, it can be spiritually based, or it can be imaginatively based, or both. And I like to use both systems, the spiritual and the secular, to try and develop the inner life. So yes, that concludes this video. So thanks for listening. And I've opened up the comments on a trial basis, but I think it should be fine. It's just I get a bit paranoid about receiving negative comments, but yeah, I've decided to open up the comments. So if you want to leave a comment, um, even if it's constructive criticism, that's fine. Just feel free to leave a comment. Okay, thanks.